Good evening, friends, and welcome to another journey through the mists of time. Tonight, I invite you to join me as we explore the captivating world of medieval knights, their secret languages, and the forgotten whispers of castle life. I'm so glad you found your way here to this peaceful corner of history. Before we begin, I encourage you to dim your lights if you haven't already. Perhaps adjust your pillow just so and settle beneath your blanket. There's no need to focus too intently on my words. Simply allow them to drift around you like a gentle fog as you prepare for rest. As we embark on this 5-hour exploration of medieval life, remember that if this calm journey helps you unwind, you're always welcome to tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right, of course. These small gestures help our little historical sanctuary grow and reach others who might be searching for a peaceful night's sleep. Now, let's travel back in time to stone castles bathed in candlelight, to whispered oaths of chivalry, and to the soft, rhythmic sounds of life from centuries past. Good evening, my drowsy friends. Tonight, we begin our journey into the world of medieval knights by exploring their fascinating secret language. Imagine yourself settling into a comfortable chair by a gently crackling fire, perhaps in a small chamber within a castle's thick stone walls, as I share with you the subtle codes, gestures, and symbols that knights once used to communicate with one another. You see, medieval knights were not just warriors. They were members of an elite brotherhood, bound by sacred oaths and shared understanding. As you relax deeper into your comfortable position, picture yourself in a world where communication often needed to happen silently, across battlefields or within the politically charged atmosphere of royal courts. Knights developed various forms of silent communication that only fellow knights would understand. Can you feel yourself drifting back in time? The soft flutter of banners in the cool evening breeze, the distant sounds of the castle settling for the night, ... Let me tell you about their hand gestures first. When knights gathered in the presence of lords or ladies who might not be trusted, they could communicate silently with subtle movements of their fingers. A small circle formed with the thumb and forefinger might indicate caution or danger. 3. Fingers extended while the others remained curled against the palm could signal a need for immediate assistance. The beauty of these signals was their subtlety. They could be performed while appearing to adjust one's cloak or sword belt, completely unnoticed by the uninitiated. The warm glow of candlelight flickers across the room as I continue this tale. Can you feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation? There's no need to remember every detail. Simply allow the gentle cadence of my voice to carry you along this historical river of knowledge. Knights also communicated through the positioning of their weapons when meeting one another on the road. The body signaled peaceful intentions, while a sword raised with the hilt at chest level was a sign of respect among equals. These silent signals allowed knights to express their intentions even before words were exchanged. Imagine encountering a fellow knight on a foggy morning road, the soft mist swirling around your horses as you exchange these meaningful gestures. The language of heraldry was perhaps the most visible form of knight communication. Those colorful shields weren't just decorative. They were elaborate storytelling devices. Every symbol, every color had significance that other knights could read like an open book. A red background, called gules in heraldic terms, spoke of warrior spirit and military strength. Eagles represented a connection to imperial power, while lions symbolized courage and nobility. Even the positioning mattered. A lion rampant, standing on its hind legs, versus a lion passant, walking with one paw raised. Can you feel yourself drifting deeper as you imagine these vibrant shields hanging in a torchlit great hall? The soft shadows playing across their surfaces, the occasional crackle from the hearth. How peaceful it feels to simply observe, to learn without effort. Perhaps most intriguing were the secret phrases knights used to identify fellow members of their orders. The Knights Templar, for example, had specific greetings and responses that allowed them to recognize brothers of their order even when meeting as strangers. One knight might begin with Nan Nobis Domini, and the correct response would be Nan Nobis, sed nomine, to Da Gloriam. Not to us, Lord, but to your name give glory. Imagine the comfort of hearing those familiar words when far from home, like finding a friend in a distant land. Knights also used small tokens or badges hidden within their garments, a small cross sewn into a hem, a particular knot tied in a belt that would be meaningless to outsiders, but instantly recognizable to fellow initiates. These subtle markers created bonds of trust and brotherhood across vast distances. The gentle rhythm of raindrops against the castle windows punctuates our storytelling now. Listen to that soothing patter, ... Simply let them wash over you as you continue to relax. Medieval knights were also masters of coded writing. Messages were often concealed using simple substitution, ciphers, where one letter would stand in for another according to a predetermined pattern. Important communications could be hidden within seemingly innocent letters about mundane matters. A discussion about crop yields or weather might contain vital military intelligence, visible only to those who knew how to look for it. I find there's something rather like a medieval Pop-Tart about these hidden messages, a plain exterior concealing something much more interesting within, of course. The language of chivalry itself was a form of code. The elaborate courtesies and formal speeches knights exchanged were filled with double meanings and subtle implications. A knight versed in the code of chivalry could express disagreement, issue challenges, or form alliances, all while appearing to engage in nothing more than polite conversation. It was rather like a medieval version of our modern diplomatic language, where what goes unsaid is often more important than what is actually spoken. The soft hum of the castle at night continues around us. Can you hear it? The distant murmur of servants preparing for the morning, the occasional soft footstep of the night watch passing by our door, ... All these gentle sounds form a backdrop to our historical journey. Knights also communicated through the arrangement of objects, the positioning of weapons at a feast, the way a cloak was draped. Even the manner of dismounting from a horse could all convey messages to those trained to observe such details. When hosting fellow knights, a lord might arrange the seating to indicate favor or displeasure, with positions closer to the high table, signifying greater honor. The language of flowers and herbs was another subtle form of communication. A knight might present a sprig of rosemary to indicate remembrance, or lavender to convey devotion. These botanical messages were especially useful when communicating with ladies, allowing sentiments to be expressed that might be inappropriate to state openly. Imagine receiving such a thoughtful token, the fresh scent of herbs filling your chamber as you contemplate its meaning. As you continue to relax, picture yourself in a medieval garden, surrounded by these meaningful plants. The cool night air carries their gentle fragrances to you, the sharp clarity of rosemary, the sweet mellowness of lavender, the bright freshness of mint. Each breath brings you deeper into this peaceful historical realm. Knights were also well versed in the symbolic meanings of colors. When choosing fabrics for tournaments or ceremonies, these choices were never random. Red represented courage and sacrifice. Blue signified loyalty and truth, while white indicated purity of intent. A knight appearing in his lord's colors was publicly declaring his allegiance, while one who changed his usual colors might be signaling a change in loyalty or circumstance. The most secret communications. Who had fought together in battle? These warriors developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate each other's movements and intentions through the smallest of signals. A slight shift in stance, a particular way of holding a shield. These tiny details could communicate elaborate battle plans without a word being spoken. This silent language was born of shared experience and mutual trust, impossible to teach and impossible to fake. Can you feel yourself drifting toward sleep now? There's no need to fight it. Allow yourself to float gently on this river of medieval knowledge, carried along by the soft current of my voice. Knights also communicated through music and songs. While we might think of minstrels as mere entertainers, they often carried coded messages in their ballads and tales. A particular melody played at a gathering might signal danger or opportunity to those who knew its significance. Some knightly orders had specific songs that, when sung, would alert fellow members to their presence. Imagine the comfort of hearing a familiar tune when far from home, like the medieval equivalent of spotting your country's flag in a foreign land. The Templars, perhaps the most famous of all the knightly orders, developed particularly elaborate systems of communication. They used a combination of spoken phrases, hand signals, and written codes to maintain secrecy within their ranks. Their banking system, which allowed pilgrims to deposit money in one Templar house and withdraw it at another, required sophisticated record-keeping and verification methods to prevent fraud. A pilgrim would receive a coded letter or token that could be presented at any Templar establishment to prove their identity and claim their funds, rather like a medieval ATM card, though considerably more elegant in design. The ambient sounds of the castle night continued to surround us. The occasional, soft call of an owl from the forest beyond the walls, the distant nickering of horses in the stables. These gentle sounds form a backdrop to our storytelling, a reminder of the living, breathing world these knights inhabited. As knights traveled, they developed systems for leaving messages for those who would follow. A particular arrangement of stones by a roadside, twigs bent in specific patterns, or marks carved subtly into trees could indicate safe shelter, danger ahead, or the recent passage of allies or enemies. These trail signs formed a kind of written language across the landscape, visible only to those who knew how to read it. I often think it was something like a medieval social media short messages left in public places, meant only for certain eyes. The firelight continues to flicker, casting a warm glow across our imaginary chamber. Can you feel its gentle warmth? The soft play of light and shadow across the stone walls creates a peaceful atmosphere as we continue our exploration of nightly communication. Prayer was another form of secret language among knights. While outwardly following the standard liturgical practices of the medieval church, many knightly orders incorporated special prayers or devotions known only to initiates. These might include additional lines added silently during common prayers, or particular ways of making the sign of the cross that would identify them to fellow members. The rhythm of these daily devotions created a spiritual bond between knights, even when physically separated by vast distances. Medieval knights also communicated through the giving of tokens. A knight might carry a small item belonging to his lord, a ring, a piece of fabric, even a lock of hair, as both a symbol of his loyalty and a means of proving his identity and authority when acting as a messenger. These tokens could be displayed openly or kept hidden depending on the circumstances, providing a flexible system of verification in an age before photo identification. The soft sounds of the night continue around us, the settling of old timbers. As the castle cools, the faint whisper of breeze through narrow windows. Let these gentle ambient noises carry you deeper into relaxation as our story continues. Some knightly orders developed entire alternative alphabets for their most secret communications. These were not simple substitution ciphers, but completely new writing systems, taught only to initiated members and used exclusively for the order's most sensitive documents. The knowledge of these scripts would die with the knights who used them, leaving modern historians to puzzle over fragmentary documents written in these mysterious codes. Imagine the patience required to learn such a system, practicing by candlelight. In the quiet hours before dawn, knights also used time itself as a form of code. Meetings might be scheduled not by naming a specific hour, but by referencing a particular prayer time, the position of certain stars, or even the blooming of specific seasonal flowers. When the Vespers bell sounds on the third day after the new moon might be the appointed time for a secret gathering. This method of timekeeping was remarkably secure, as it required not only knowledge of the code, but also a shared understanding of natural cycles and church practices. The crackling of the hearth fire continues, its gentle rhythm, with each soft pop and hiss of the flames. You might find yourself drifting deeper into relaxation, your thoughts becoming more diffuse, your awareness of the present moment softening around the edges. The language of oaths was perhaps the most binding form of knightly communication. The specific words used when swearing fealty or making promises carried enormous weight in medieval society. Knights carefully considered their exact phrasing, as the wording of an oath defined the limits of their obligations. A promise to serve until death was different from one to serve until released, and knights were acutely aware of these distinctions. The ceremony of oath-taking was rich with symbolic gestures, kneeling, the placing of hands, the kissing of relics, each adding layers of meaning to the spoken words. Messages were sometimes concealed within seemingly ordinary objects. A seemingly decorative pattern on a belt might actually be words woven into the design. The arrangement of jewels in a sword hilt could spell out a name or phrase when viewed with the right knowledge. Even food could carry messages. Particular combinations of dishes or spices might signal intentions or convey information to those who understood the code. Picture a knight at a feast, recognizing a secret message in the seemingly random arrangement of pastries on a platter. The night deepens around our storytelling chamber. The castle grows quieter, with only the occasional creak of a door or distant footsteps to remind us of the world beyond our cozy fireside. Allow yourself to sink deeper into this peaceful medieval evening. Nights, traveling in foreign days, developed subtle ways of identifying themselves to potential allies. The manner of fastening a cloak, the positioning of a ring, or the specific words used when requesting hospitality could all serve as identification to those who knew what to look for. These signals allowed knights to find safe harbor and assistance. Even when far from home and surrounded by strangers, it was rather like having a secret password that opened doors throughout the medieval world. The education of young knights included training in these various forms of communication. As pages and then squires, they would gradually be introduced to the secret languages of knighthood, learning first the most basic signals and codes, then progressing to more complex systems as they proved their trustworthiness and skill. By the time a young man was formally knighted, he would be fluent in these various forms of silent communication. The gentle sounds of night continue. Around us perhaps the soft hooting of an owl from the forest beyond the castle walls, or the faint rustling of tapestries stirred by a draught. These ambient sounds create a peaceful backdrop for our historical explorations. Of course, not all knightly communication was secret. Heralds served as public messengers, their proclamations deliberately loud and clear. The brilliant banners and surcoats worn in tournament were meant to be easily identified across a crowded field. But even these public displays contained layers of meaning accessible only to the initiated. The specific combination of colors, the arrangement of symbols, the subtle differences between similar-looking devices, all these details told stories to those who could read them. The transmission of these secret languages from one generation to the next was a careful, deliberate process. Older knights would select promising young men to receive particular knowledge, ensuring that sacred traditions and practical communication methods would survive even as individual knights passed away. This continuous thread of shared knowledge helped maintain the identity and cohesion of knightly orders through centuries of political and social change. As our fire burns lower, casting the room in a softer, more diffused glow, you might find your own thoughts becoming similarly soft and diffuse. There's no need to concentrate too hard on my words. Simply allow them to wash over you, carrying you gently toward sleep. The language of chivalric love was perhaps the most elaborate code of all. Knights and ladies developed an intricate system of gestures, tokens, and phrases that allowed them to express sentiments that could not be stated openly in the restrictive social environment of medieval courts. A glove dropped at a particular moment, a flower presented with certain fingers, a seemingly casual phrase with a secondary meaning. All these formed part of an elaborate dance of communication between the sexes, hidden in plain sight within the conventions of courtly behavior. The weather itself could be incorporated into knightly codes. When 3 days of rain are followed by clear skies, might indicate the time for action. References to particular seasonal events, after the first frost, or when the swallows return, could establish timelines for plans that needed to remain secret from potential eavesdroppers. This integration of natural cycles into communication reflected the medieval world's close connection to seasonal patterns. The night sounds continue their gentle symphony around us, the soft settling of the castle, the distant call of night birds, the occasional whisper of wind through ancient stonework. Let these peaceful ambient sounds carry you deeper into relaxation as our exploration of nightly language continues. Knights also used the symbolism of animals in their communications. A falcon might represent swiftness, a bear strength, a fox cunning. These associations were widely understood within knightly circles, allowing complex messages to be conveyed through seemingly simple references to wildlife. A warning to beware the approaching foxes would be understood as an alert about cunning enemies, while advice to fly like the falcon suggested a need for rapid action. The positioning of weapons during ceremonies and gatherings carried specific meanings beyond their practical function. A sword placed on the right side rather than the left, a shield displayed with particular orientation, or a lance held at a specific angle. All these details communicated information about a knight's status, intentions, and allegiances to those trained to observe such subtleties. The fire has burned even lower now, casting the chamber in a warm, dim glow that invites sleep. The shadows dance more slowly on the walls, and the crackling has subsided to occasional soft pops as the embers settle. As you breathe deeply and regularly, you might find yourself drifting closer to the edges of slumber. Languages themselves served as codes among medieval knights. Latin phrases inserted into conversation might carry specific meanings beyond their literal translation. Knights traveling abroad often learned key phrases in multiple languages, not for fluent communication, but to establish their identity and intentions through specific word choices and pronunciations that would signal their knightly status to those in the know. The giving of names was another aspect of knightly communication. Knights often bestowed names on their weapons, horses, and even specific pieces of armor. These names weren't merely sentimental, but often contained references to family histories, personal vows, or significant achievements that other knights would recognize. A sword named Oathkeeper or Widow's Tears told a story to those who understood the tradition. As the night deepens further, the castle grows even quieter around us. Perhaps only the occasional soft creak of timber or distant call of a night bird breaks the silence. This peaceful stillness invites you to release any remaining tension, allowing yourself to drift ever closer to sleep. The tradition of nightly vigils before important ceremonies created another opportunity for secret communication. As a knight kept watch through the night in a chapel or sacred space, visitors might come to share information or instructions that needed to remain private. The solemnity of these vigils provided perfect cover for such exchanges, as the presence of others would not seem unusual, and conversations could be disguised as spiritual guidance or prayer. Musical instruments played roles beyond entertainment in nightly communication. Particular horn calls signaled specific messages across battlefields or hunting grounds. The rhythm of drums could convey information about troop movements or battle plans. Even the civilian music at feasts and celebrations might contain coded elements. A particular song requested at a specific moment could alert fellow knights to danger or opportunity. The chamber is growing dimmer as our fire subsides to glowing embers. This gentle darkness is like a soft blanket, inviting deeper relaxation and the gradual transition towards sleep. There's no need to resist this peaceful progression. Simply allow yourself to drift with the rhythm of my words. Knights also communicated through the careful timing of their arrivals and departures from significant events. Appearing precisely at dawn or exactly at sunset might signal particular intentions to observant fellow knights. Leaving a feast before or after specific ceremonial moments could likewise convey messages without words. Sounds impossible signals required no physical tokens or spoken codes, making them particularly secure forms of communication. The architecture of castles themselves sometimes incorporated elements of secret communication. Hidden windows positioned to catch the light at particular times of day, corridors designed to carry sounds in unexpected ways, or stones carved with subtle marks visible only from specific angles. All these features could be used by knowledgeable knights to send and receive messages within seemingly solid walls. Imagine standing at exactly the right spot in a great hall, catching a glimpse of a signal mirror through a narrow window at precisely noon. The knight has fully embraced our storytelling chamber now. The fire has diminished to a warm glow, and the castle slumbers around us. As you continue to relax, you might find your own thoughts becoming like those embers, warm, comfortable, gradually subsiding toward the peaceful darkness of sleep. In the end, perhaps the most powerful form of nightly communication was silence itself. Knowing when not to speak, when information should remain unshared, was a skill as valued as eloquence. Knights learned to read meaning in what remained unsaid, in hesitations and omissions, a question left unanswered, a topic carefully avoided, a name deliberately not mentioned. These silences spoke volumes to those trained to listen for them. As our exploration of the secret language of knights comes to a close for tonight, I invite you to carry these peaceful historical images with you into your dreams. Picture yourself in that medieval world of subtle signals and hidden meanings, where a knight might share an entire story through nothing more than the position of his sword, or the color of a ribbon tied to his sleeve. And as you drift toward sleep, remember that in some ways, we still use the descendants of these secret languages today. Our modern symbols and signals, from traffic lights to emoji, are part of that long human tradition of creating meaning beyond words, connecting us across the centuries to those medieval knights and their fascinating codes. Now, let the gentle sounds of the castle night surround you. The distant hoot of an owl, the soft settling of ancient timbers, the barely perceptible whisper of wind through stone corridors. Allow these peaceful, ambient sounds to carry you across the threshold, into slumber, where perhaps knights and castles await you in your dreams. Welcome back, dear friends, to our continuing journey through medieval history. In this chapter, we'll be exploring the gentle, rhythmic patterns that governed life within castle walls. As you settle deeper into comfort, imagine yourself awakening within a stone chamber as the first light of dawn filters through a narrow window. The day of a castle dweller is about to begin. Following customs and routines established over centuries, The medieval day began not with the jarring sound of an alarm clock, but with the melodious ringing of church bells. These bells served as the heartbeat of castle life, marking the hours of prayer, known as the canonical hours. Can you hear it in your mind? The deep, resonant tone echoing across the sleeping countryside, calling the most devout to rise for early prayers. Most castle inhabitants, however, would wait for the bells of prime, ringing at approximately 6 a.m. to begin their day. Imagine yourself stirring from sleep on a straw-filled mattress, perhaps covered with soft furs if you were of noble birth. The chamber would be cool, as fires would have burned down during the night. Perhaps a servant has already entered quietly to rekindle the flames and provide some warmth before you need to rise. The sounds of early morning castle life gradually grow around you. The distant voices of servants beginning their chores, the clatter of pots from the kitchen, the occasional bark of dogs in the courtyard. These ambient sounds create a gentle symphony that has awakened countless generations before you, a timeless morning melody. Your first task of the day would likely be washing, unlike the popular misconception that medieval people rarely bathed. Cleanliness was actually quite valued, especially among the nobility. A servant might bring a basin of water to your chamber, heated if you were of high status, cool if you were not, while full immersion baths were less frequent due to the labor involved in heating and carrying so much water. Daily washing of hands, face, and sometimes feet was common practice. The ritual of dressing was considerably more involved than our modern equivalent, especially for nobles. Multiple layers of clothing needed to be properly arranged and fastened for a knight, even when not wearing armor. Appropriate dress included linen undergarments, woolen hose held up with garters, a linen shirt, perhaps a doublet or tunic over that, and various outer garments depending on the weather and occasion. Ladies of the castle would have even more complex ensembles with additional layers and accessories as you continue to relax deeper into comfort. Picture the soft textures of these medieval fabrics, the smooth coolness of linen against the skin, the warm embrace of wool, perhaps the occasional luxury of silk or velvet for those of highest status. Disposable modern era. The first meal of the day was typically light compared to later ones. It might consist of bread with perhaps some cheese or preserved fruit, accompanied by ale or watered wine, even in the morning hours, as water alone was often rightfully suspected of carrying disease. Imagine the yeasty aroma of fresh bread, baked in the castle's ovens before dawn, perhaps still warm as you break it apart. This morning meal wouldn't be the elaborate affair we might imagine when thinking of medieval feasts. Often it was taken standing or sitting on simple benches with minimal ceremony. The greater focus was on the midday and evening meals. After breaking your fast, the day's work would begin in earnest for the lord of the castle. Mornings might be devoted to the business of his estate. Imagine him seated at a heavy wooden table in the solar, a private room for the family, reviewing accounts with his steward, addressing disputes among tenants, or reading correspondence delivered by messengers. Parchment, the rustling of documents, the occasional murmur of consultation. These quiet sounds would form the backdrop to these. The lady of the castle wasn't merely decorative, but functioned as the chief operations officer of a complex enterprise. She would meet with the head cook to plan meals, inspect stores, oversee the work of servants, and ensure that everything from candle making to weaving to brewing was proceeding properly. It was rather like managing a small, self-sufficient town, requiring considerable skill and knowledge. The gentle rhythms of these morning activities continue around you as you relax deeper. There's something soothing about imagining these daily routines that changed little over centuries, providing structure and meaning to countless lives through the medieval period. By mid-morning, the castle would be fully awake and bustling with activity. In the inner ward or bailey, knights might be training with weapons, their practice sessions creating a rhythmic soundtrack of clashing wood and metal, punctuated by calls of instruction and the occasional cheer for a well-executed maneuver. These training sessions weren't just for combat readiness, but also maintained physical fitness and reinforced the bonds between knights who might need to trust each other with their lives in battle. In the castle kitchens, preparation for the main meal of the day would be well underway. Medieval cooking was a day-long affair, with many dishes requiring hours of slow cooking over open flames. The heat of the kitchen fires, combined with the physical labor of chopping, stirring, and lifting heavy pots, made this one of the warmest and most demanding areas of the castle. Yet, there was a beautiful choreography to the work, with each cook and kitchen servant knowing their role in the creation of the meal. Can you smell the aromas beginning to emanate from those medieval kitchens? The rich scent of meat slowly roasting on spits, the yeasty perfume of bread baking in stone ovens, the sharp tang of herbs being crushed for seasonings. These scents would waft through parts of the castle throughout the day, creating an olfactory calendar that marked the progression of hours. In the castle gardens, work would continue through the morning hours, spaces but essential sources of food and medicine. Herb gardens provided not only flavoring for the kitchen, but ingredients for the castle's medical practitioner. Vegetables grew in neat rows, tended by dedicated gardeners who understood the rhythms of planting and harvesting that sustained castle life through the changing seasons. As the sun climbed higher, its light would filter through narrow castle windows, creating pools of illumination that moved slowly across stone floors, like nature's own sundials. These shifting patterns of light and shadow marked the passing hours in a visual way, complementing the auditory timekeeping of the church bells. The sound of children at their lessons might be heard from certain chambers, young pages learning their letters, practicing languages, or receiving instruction in proper behavior would form a part of the castle's daily symphony. Education was taken seriously, particularly for noble children, with many castles employing dedicated tutors or sending children to live in other noble households to receive appropriate training. Allow yourself to sink deeper into relaxation as you imagine these gentle sounds of learning, the recitation of lessons, the patient corrections of tutors, the occasional laughter when something amusing disrupted the serious business of education. There's something timeless about these sounds that connects us across the centuries. As midday approached, the castle's activity would begin to shift toward the main meal of the day, called dinner in medieval times. This was typically served around what we would consider late morning or noon, making it closer to our modern lunch than our evening dinner. The great hall would be prepared, with trestle tables set up and benches arranged according to strict protocols of status and hierarchy. The Ringing of the sexed bells around noon often signaled the time for this important meal. Imagine the gradual gathering of castle inhabitants, knights returning from training, the lord and lady concluding their morning business, servants completing morning chores, all converging on the great hall, guided by both bells and growing. Hunger hand-washing was an important ritual before medieval meals, with servants carrying basins and towels for guests to cleanse their hands. This practice was both practical, as most food would be eaten with the fingers, and symbolic of the purification before partaking in God's bounty. Picture the quiet dignity of this pre-meal ceremony, with water poured over outstretched hands into basins, murmur of conversations, the scraping of benches on stone floors, perhaps the tuning of instruments, if musicians were to perform during the meal. These sounds would echo in the high-ceilinged space, creating a gentle cacophony that signaled the social importance of this gathering. Food would be brought out in a carefully choreographed procession. Order. The most prestigious diners, seated at the high table on a raised dais, would be served first, with the best portions reserved for them. Imagine the steaming platters of food carried by servants, roasted meats, freshly baked breads, seasonal vegetables prepared with herbs from the garden, perhaps fish if it were a fast day when meat was forbidden by religious custom. As you continue to relax deeper, envision the mingling aromas of this medieval feast, the rich scent of roasted venison, the yeasty warmth of fresh bread, the sweet fragrance of spiced wine. These complex sensory experiences were an important part of medieval dining, appreciated by people who lived much closer to the sources of their food than we typically do today. Conversation during meals followed certain expectations, with topics considered appropriate for dining and others avoided. Music might be played, or a storyteller might entertain the diners with tales of adventure or moral instruction. In some noble households, the reading aloud of improving texts, religious works, or histories might accompany the meal, providing food for both body and mind. The medieval dinner might last 1 to 2 hours, depending on the importance of the occasion and the status of the household. When it concluded, many castle inhabitants would take advantage of the early afternoon for a brief period of rest. This custom of taking a short sleep after the midday meal was common across medieval Europe, recognized as beneficial for health and productivity. Benefits of power naps. Imagine the castle growing somewhat quieter during this rest period, with activities slowing and voices hushing. Shutters might be drawn to create cool, dim spaces conducive to brief slumber on hot summer afternoons. The ambient sounds would soften to gentle snores, the distant activities of those whose duties continued regardless of the hour, and perhaps the soft cooing of doves nesting in the castle towers. As the afternoon progressed, the castle would gradually reawaken to the second phase of daily activities. For knights, this might include more specialized training, administrative duties related to their lands, or perhaps hunting if the season and circumstances allowed. The sound of hooves on the drawbridge might signal a hunting party departing, with the excited baying of hounds adding to the auditory tapestry of castle life. The lady of the castle might use afternoon hours for more personally engaging work, such as embroidery, music, or correspondence. Noble ladies were often well educated and maintained important social and political connections through their letters. Picture her seated near a window for better light, perhaps with several ladies in waiting nearby, their needles flashing as they created beautiful decorative work for garments or wall hangings, while discussing matters of household and wider interest. Throughout the castle, craftspeople would continue their specialized work. A castle was not merely a military installation, but a self-contained community that produced many of its own necessities. The rhythmic sounds of the blacksmith's hammer, the whir of spinning wheels, the scrape of the carpenter's plane, these productive sounds formed an important part of the daily symphony, evidence of the many skilled hands that maintained castle life. As you continue to relax deeper, there's something deeply soothing about the rhythm of traditional handwork, about human hands creating necessary objects with skill developed over years of practice. These sounds connect us to our ancestors in a visceral way that transcends the centuries. The bells ringing for nones around 3 p.m. would signal the beginning of late afternoon activities. For the piously inclined, this might include attendance at another church service. For others, it marked a shift toward preparation for the evening meal and settling of the day's business before nightfall. This later part of the day often included time for more social activities. Chess and other board games provided both entertainment and mental exercise. Conversation in solar or garden allowed for the exchange of news and the maintenance of social bonds. On pleasant days, castle inhabitants might enjoy outdoor games or simply the pleasure of fresh air in the castle's inner courtyard. Can you imagine yourself? Golden quality of approaching evening, perhaps listening to someone skilled in storytelling, or engaged in a friendly competition of wits with a game of chess or backgammon. These quieter pleasures were an important counterbalance to the sometimes harsh realities of medieval life. As shadows lengthened across the castle grounds, preparation would begin for the evening meal called supper. Smaller and less elaborate than dinner, supper nevertheless represented an important daily ritual of gathering and sustenance. The kitchen fires would be built up again, though fewer dishes would typically be prepared than at midday. The bells of vespers around 6 p.m. often coincided with this evening meal. As the golden light of late afternoon gave way to the softer hues of evening, candles and torches would be lit throughout the castle, creating pools of warm illumination against the growing darkness. The lighting of these flames was itself a ritual, marking the transition from day to night with a gentle ceremony of illumination. Imagine the soft flicker of candlelight gradually filling the great hall, creating dancing shadows on stone walls and gleaming on polished wooden surfaces. There's something primally comforting about gathering around light as darkness falls, a human instinct that connects us directly to our medieval ancestors as they shared their evening meal. Supper would typically consist of lighter fare than the midday dinner, perhaps cold meats left from earlier, bread and cheese, seasonal fruits, if available, accompanied by ale or wine. The atmosphere would generally be more relaxed than at dinner, with less ceremony and formality. Conversations might be quieter, more reflective as the day's activities were discussed and evaluated after the evening meal. The daily rhythms of the castle would begin to slow in preparation for night. For the piously inclined, attendance at Compline. The final church service of the day around 9 p.m. provided a spiritual conclusion to daily activities. The beautiful, chanted prayers of this service were designed to prepare the soul for the vulnerability of sleep, asking for divine protection through the darkness. The harmonized voices rising toward vaulted ceilings, the occasional soft cough or rustle of clothing that only others sounds as the castle community gathered for this final devotion. There's something incredibly soothing about these ancient prayers, designed specifically to ease the transition from wakefulness to sleep for those not attending religious services. Evening hours provided time for quieter entertainment. This was when storytelling truly came into its own, with tales shared around fires as darkness gathered outside. A skilled storyteller could transport listeners to fantastic realms or distant historical events, creating mental images as vivid as any modern film. These oral traditions preserved history, imparted moral lessons, and simply provided entertainment in an age before books were widely available. Picture yourself seated near the comforting warmth of a hearth, perhaps on a cushioned bench or even on rush matting spread across the floor. The storyteller's voice rises and falls with practiced skill, sometimes dropping to a whisper that makes listeners lean forward, sometimes swelling dramatically to emphasize a crucial moment. Around you, other listeners react with gasps, chuckles, or murmurs of appreciation, creating a communal experience of the narrative. Music often accompanied these evening gatherings. The gentle strumming of a lute or harp created a soothing backdrop for conversation or served as entertainment in its own right. Songs might be performed by household members with particular talent or by professional musicians if the castle was wealthy enough to support them. These musical interludes connected castle dwellers to a wider cultural world and provided emotional expression in an age that often required stoic endurance. As you continue to relax deeper, imagine the soft notes of a medieval harp floating through a firelit chamber, its melodic patterns both familiar and strange to modern ears. The musician's fingers move with practiced precision across the strings, creating cascades of notes that seem to crystallize in the cool evening air before dissolving into silence. With darkness fully established outside, preparation for sleep would begin. Unlike our modern habit of staying awake hours after sunset, medieval people generally aligned their sleeping patterns more closely with natural light. While the exact timing varied by season, social status, and individual preference, most castle inhabitants would begin preparing for bed not long after darkness fell completely. The rituals of preparing for sleep were taken quite seriously in medieval times. Prayers were considered essential, with specific devotions designed to protect the vulnerable sleeping soul. Physical preparations included banking fires safely for the night, securing doors and windows, and perhaps taking a final small drink of ale or wine as a nightcap. The bedchambers themselves would be prepared with care. Bed curtains would be drawn to preserve warmth and create a cocoon-like space for sleep. In noble chambers, warming pans filled with hot embers might be passed between the sheets to take the chill off cold linens before their occupants retired. Imagine the comforting warmth spreading through previously cool bedding, inviting the weary body to sink into restful slumber. Medieval people often slept somewhat differently than we do today. Rather than expecting to remain unconscious for a solid 8 hours, Many experienced what historians call segmented sleep, a first sleep of several hours, followed by a period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, and then a second sleep until morning. This wakeful period was used for reflection, quiet conversation with bedmates' prayer, or even intimate relations between spouses. Can you envision yourself awakening in that midnight hour? The castle utterly quiet around you, perhaps a sliver of moonlight finding its way through a narrow window. There's a special quality to such nighttime wakefulness, a liminal space between dreams where thoughts seem to flow differently than during daylight hours. Our medieval ancestors valued this time rather than considering it problematic insomnia. As we might today, the ambient sounds of the sleeping castle would be minimal but not entirely absent. The occasional creak of timbers adjusting to temperature changes, the distant hoot of an owl from the surrounding countryside, perhaps the soft footsteps of the night watch making their rounds. These gentle sounds would form a quiet backdrop. 2 nighttime consciousness. Night watches were an essential part of castle security, with designated guards patrolling battlements and courtyards throughout the dark hours. These watchmen would call out the hours and sometimes conditions. 11 of the clock and all is well, providing auditory markers of time's passage for any wakeful ears. Imagine the comfort of hearing these calls from your warm bed, knowing attentive eyes were keeping watch while you rested. Most castle inhabitants would return to sleep after their wakeful period, remaining in bed until the morning bells once again announced the start of a new day. The cycle would begin again. Prayers, washing, dressing, breaking fast, following patterns, established over generations and continued through centuries. This rhythmic quality of medieval castle lack, the predictability of days ordered by bells and seasons, by natural light and ancient custom, created a framework of time that was human-scaled and connected to natural cycles. While we might not wish to return to all aspects of medieval life, there's something appealing about this ordered progression of ours, this attunement to natural rhythms. As you continue to relax deeper, consider how your own day might benefit from more attention to natural transitions, the quality of morning light, the midday peak of energy, the reflective potential of evening hours. Our bodies still respond to these ancient patterns, even in our electrically illuminated world. The changing of seasons brought variations to these daily rhythms. Summer days extended activities into the longer evening light, while winter compressed the productive hours into a shorter span between dawn and dusk. Seasonal foods appeared on tables according to nature's timetable, creating a circular menu that repeated with comforting predictability each year. Religious festivals punctuated the year with special observances that modified daily routines. Fast days required adjustment of meals. Feast days expanded them into elaborate celebrations. And specific saints' days might call for particular traditions within the castle community. These variations prevented the rhythmic patterns of daily life from becoming monotonous, inserting moments of special significance into the flowing river of ordinary time. The gentle turn of seasons within castle walls had its own sensory markers. Spring might bring the scent of new herbs in the garden and the sound of returning birds nesting in tower crevices. Summer filled the air with the sweet perfume of roses from the castle garden and the distant songs of haymakers in surrounding Fields autumn brought the sharp temps of smoke from apple wood burning in the kitchens as the harvest was preserved. Winter wrapped the castle in stillness, with snow muffling outside sounds and hearth fires crackling more prominently in the cold silence. As you drift closer to sleep, allow your imagination to experience these seasonal shifts within the safe enclosure of castle walls. There's something deeply reassuring about the cyclical nature of medieval time, the way it honored both linear progression and circular return, creating a pattern that acknowledged both change and continuity. The daily rhythms of castle life were also punctuated by less predictable events. The arrival of messengers might bring news that altered plans or created new activities. Visitors required special accommodations and often ceremonial welcomes that disrupted normal routines. Weather conditions might force adjustments to outdoor work or travel plans. Yet even these disruptions were incorporated into the overall structure of castle life, with protocols for managing unexpected developments. Medieval people understood something we often forget, that rhythmic patterns provide not constraint but freedom within the established framework of daily castle life. Individuals found security that allowed for creativity, productivity, and meaningful connection. The bells that marked the hours were not tyrannical but supportive, creating a shared temporal landscape that united the castle community in common purpose. Imagine the comfort of knowing exactly what comes next, the reassurance that its pattern has supported countless lives before yours. There's a gentle wisdom in this medieval approach to time, an acknowledgement of human needs for both structure and flexibility, for both community synchronization and personal agency. As night deepens around our imagined castle, activity diminishes to its lowest ebb. Perhaps only the night watch remains fully alert, with everyone else surrendered to sleep or quiet contemplation in darkened chambers. The massive stone walls stand protective around this community of sleepers, just as they have for generations before and will for generations to come. The ambient sounds of the sleeping castle grow. Through arrow slits, the distant call of night birds from the forest, the nearly imperceptible settling of ancient timbers. These quiet sounds form a lullaby that has eased countless people into slumber over the centuries, a gentle sonic blanket that remains largely unchanged from medieval times to our own. And so we conclude our exploration of the daily rhythms. Castle life, this medieval dance of hours and activities that structured existence within stone walls. As you drift toward sleep, perhaps you'll carry with you some appreciation for these ancient patterns, these human-scaled divisions of time that honored both practical needs and spiritual dimensions. May the gentle rhythms of medieval life guide you toward peaceful slumber, just as they once guided our ancestors through their days and nights, through seasons and years, through the grand flowing river of history that connects us all across the centuries. Welcome back, dear friends. Far more than mere meals, these elaborate events combined sustenance, entertainment, social bonding, and political maneuvering in ways that might surprise our modern sensibilities. Let the gentle, ambient sounds of a castle preparing for a grand banquet surround you as we begin this soothing exploration. Imagine yourself approaching a great hall on the evening of an important feast. The first thing you might notice is the transformed atmosphere freshly strewn across the stone floor. Sweet-smelling herbs weren't merely decorative, but served practical purposes, masking less pleasant odors and providing what medieval people believed were health benefits through their aromas. The soft crunch of these rushes beneath your feet, the mingling herbal scents rising with each step, lavender, rosemary, and meadowsweet, create an immediate sensory shift from everyday castle spaces to the special realm of the feast. Can you smell these gentle fragrances? Allow them to surround you as you relax deeper into comfort. Illumination for medieval feasts was a serious consideration, with hundreds of candles and torches transforming the normally dim great hall into a realm of flickering golden light. Imagine the warm glow reflecting from polished wooden tables and metal serving vessels, creating an atmosphere of almost magical radiance against the stone walls. The expense of this lighting was itself a display of wealth, as beeswax candles were costly luxury items, reserved for special occasions. The ambient sounds of pre-feast preparation would surround you, servants arranging trestle tables in strict hierarchical order, the clinking of precious metal or glass vessels being placed, perhaps musicians tuning their instruments in a corner. These preparations might have been underway for hours or even days, depending on the importance of the feast and the status of expected guests. Medieval feasts followed elaborate protocols regarding seating arrangements. The high table, set on a raised dais at one end of the hall, would accommodate the host and the most honored guests. Other tables would be arranged perpendicular to this, with seating positions carefully determined by social rank. Being seated below the salt, referring to the large salt cellar that typically divided Theatable indicated lower status, a phrase that survives in our language today. As you continue to relax deeper, picture the colorful scene of guests arriving for the feast. Unlike our modern restaurants, with their relatively uniform appearance, medieval feast attendees would display their social status through their attire. Vibrant colors, rich fabrics, and elaborate personal adornments would create a visual pageant as people found their designated places. The feast would begin with a ceremonial washing of hands. Servants would circulate with basins of scented water and towels, starting with the highest-ranking guests and proceeding down through the social hierarchy. This practice was both practical, as most food would be eaten with the fingers, and symbolic, representing purification before receiving God's bounty. Can you imagine the gentle sensation of warm water being poured over your hands, perhaps scented with rose petals or infused with herbs? The soft texture of a linen towel as your hands are dried. These sensory experiences were an important part of the transition into feast time, signaling a shift from ordinary activities to the special experience about to unfold. The actual presentation of food at medieval feasts was theatrical in nature. Dishes were brought in with ceremonial procession, sometimes accompanied by music, and presented first to the host for approval before being served to guests according to their rank. Particularly impressive dishes might receive special fanfare: a roasted peacock redressed in its magnificent feathers, a subtlety sculptural food creation depicting a scene from history or legend, or a pie from which live birds might be released. Upon cutting, medieval feast food was far more varied and flavorful than popular misconceptions suggest. While heavily spiced dishes were indeed popular among the nobility, spices being expensive status symbols, Medieval cooks had sophisticated understanding of balancing flavors and creating varied textures. Their recipe collections reveal complex preparations that required considerable skill and artistic sensibility. The soothing sounds of the feast surround Yanotha, murmur of polite conversation, the occasional laughter, the soft notes of background music from lute or harp. Perhaps you hear the gentle clink of goblets, the sound of bread being broken, the appreciative murmurs as particularly impressive dishes are presented. Allow these ambient feast sounds to deepen your relaxation as our exploration continues. 1. Key difference between medieval and modern dining was the concept of courses. Rather than our sequence of appetizer, main course, and dessert, medieval feasts featured multiple courses, each containing a variety of sweet and savory dishes simultaneously. A single course might include roasted meats, fish preparations, fruit tarts, and spiced custards all at once, with diners selecting whatever appealed to them from the available options. The first course typically began with lighter dishes, sliced fruits, leafy green salads, dressed with oil and vinegar, or thin soups called potages. These were followed by increasingly substantial offerings within the same coarse fish dishes, poultry, and red meats, often accompanied by various sauces specifically paired with particular foods. Bread was a constant presence throughout the meal, with different qualities offered based on social status. The whitest, finest bread went to the high table, while darker, coarser loaves served those of lower rank. Far from being merely a side item, bread functioned as both plate and utensil, with diners using trenchers, thick slices of dialed bread, to hold their food and soak up sauces. The gentle tearing of bread, the satisfying absorption of flavorful sauces into the trencher surface. These tactile experiences were integral to medieval dining, creating a direct connection between food and hands that our modern tableware prevents. As you continue to relax deeper, imagine the pleasant weight of a trencher in your hand, soft enough to fold slightly, but sturdy enough to support its savory burden. Beverages flowed freely at medieval feasts, with wine preferred by the nobility, and ale or beer by those of lower status. Water was rarely consumed alone, as it was often unsafe, though it might be mixed with wine. Special drinks for feasts included hippocras, a spiced wine preparation, and clary, wine infused with honey and spices. These weren't merely consumed for pleasure, but were believed to help balance the humors and aid digestion when properly paired with certain foods between major courses. Small entremet or entertainments might be presented. These could include musical performances, acrobatics, short dramatic scenes, or even elaborate mechanical devices that delivered food to the table in surprising ways. Imagine the delight of feast attendees as a miniature ship with silk sails glides down the center of the table, laden with spiced wine for the guests, or at the appearance of musicians playing lively tunes that momentarily transform the feast into a performance space. The ambient sounds shift now to include these: the rhythmic beating of small drums, or the clear voice of a singer performing a ballad about legendary heroes or courtly love. These performances provided not just entertainment, but also convenient pauses for servants to clear away remnants of one course and prepare for the next. The second and subsequent courses would follow similar patterns, but with increasingly elaborate dishes, roasted meats, presented in their original form but redressed with feathers or fur, created dramatic visual impact. Pies with elaborate decorative crusts might contain surprising combinations, often ingredients meats with fruits, fish with spices, or game with preserved berries. The medieval palate enjoyed combinations we might find unusual today, such as chicken with cinnamon or fish with raisins. As you drift deeper into relaxation, picture the vibrant colors of these feast presentations, the rich browns of perfectly roasted meats, the golden crusts of freshly baked pies, the bright greens of herb sauces, the ruby reds of wine. Medieval feasts were a feast for the eyes as much as for the palate, with color and arrangement considered essential elements of proper food presentation. The pace of medieval feasting was considerably slower than our modern meals. A significant feast might last 4 to 6 hours, with courses presented at leisurely intervals to allow for proper appreciation and digestion. This unhurried approach to dining created space for the equally important social aspects of thiefist conversation, observation of others, and participation in the collective experience of abundance. Conversation during feasts followed certain conventions, with topics considered suitable for table talk and others avoided. Discussion of the food itself was encouraged, as commenting positively on the host's provisions was a form of compliment. Light debate on non-controversial matters might be entertained, along with sharing of news and appropriate stories. The gentle hum of these feast conversations created a social backdrop that was as nourishing in its way as the food itself. The ambient sounds of the feast continue around the appreciative murmurs as a particularly impressive dish is presented, the gentle laughter at a witticism shared among tablemates, perhaps the soft background notes of a lute being strummed. These pleasant social sounds create a gentle auditory blanket that deepens your relaxation as our exploration continues. Toward the end of a medieval feast came what we might consider dessert courses, though these weren't strictly separated from savory dishes, as in modern dining. Sweet dishes included fruit tarts, custards flavored with honey or spices, wafers formed into decorative shapes, and various preparations involving dried fruits and nuts preserved from the previous harvest. Medieval people had no access to chocolate or refined sugar as we know it, instead using honey, fruit juices, and occasionally expensive imported cane sugar for sweetening. A particularly beloved closing to an important feast was the subtlety or subtlety unelaborate creation made from sugar paste, marzipan, or wax that depicted scenes, buildings, or figures relevant to the occasion. These weren't always intended to be eaten, but served as conversation pieces and demonstrations of the chef's artistic skill. Imagine the delighted reaction as a miniature sugar castle is presented, or a marzipan garden complete with edible flowers. For the most elaborate feasts, the subtleties might tell a story across multi-pelcruses, perhaps the progression of a hunt, scenes from a popular legend, or symbolic representations of the host's family history. These edible art pieces served political purposes as well, reinforcing power relationships and emphasizing connections between the host and honored guests through visual metaphors. Wine and spiced drinks would continue to flow throughout the feast, with special emphasis on Hippocras as a digestive aid at the meal's conclusion. Medieval medical theory held that proper digestion required closing the stomach after eating, and the warm spices in Hippocras were believed to accomplish this protective sealing. The feast might conclude with a ceremonial serving of this spiced wine, perhaps presented in especially ornate cups to mark the meal's end. The gentle clinking of these final drinks, being served in the soft, appreciative sighs as weary diners sip the warming spiced wine. These soothing sounds signal the feast's gradual conclusion. As you continue to relax deeper, imagine the satisfied feeling of having participated in this elaborate shared experience. Your senses pleasantly filled with flavors, aromas, sounds, and sights. After the formal feast concluded, entertainment might continue for those with sufficient energy. Music for dancing could transform the great hall from a dining space to a ballroom, with tables moved aside to create room for movement. Medieval dances ranged from stately processional forms to more energetic circle dances, with participation often determined by social status and physical ability after such abundant consumption. For others, the post-feast period might involve quieter pleasures, chess, or other board games played by the hearth, conversation in smaller groups, or simply appreciative rest while digesting the meal. The great hall would gradually empty as guests retired, with servants beginning the substantial task of cleaning and restoring the space to its usual arrangement. The ambient sounds of this late feast period surround, perhaps the softer melodies of night music on a harp, the murmur of quieter conversations, the occasional distant laughter from those still celebrating, and underneath it all, the gentle crackling of hearth fires maintained against the night's coolness. These soothing sounds create a perfect background for deepening relaxation. As our exploration continues, medieval feasts served purposes far beyond mere nutrition. They were opportunities for hosts to display wealth and status through the quality and quantity of food, the skill of presentation, and the caliber of entertainment. Provided the ability to offer rare spices, out-of-seasoned foods, or exotic imports demonstrated both financial resources and far-reaching connections. Feasts also created and reinforced social bonds. Sharing food has been a fundamental human bonding activity throughout history, and medieval people understood the community-building power of collective dining. Relationships between lords and their dependents, between neighboring nobles, or between potential allies could all be strengthened through the shared experience of an abundant feast. Political messaging was often embedded in feast presentations. Seating arrangements communicated clear signals about who was in favor and who was not. The quality of service offered to different guests could subtly indicate their standing with the host. Even the foods served might contain symbolism. Offering fish to someone on a meat day could imply they needed to practice penance, while sharing particularly choice portions indicated special favor. As you drift deeper into relaxation, consider how these medieval feasting traditions continue to influence our own celebration meals today. Our holiday gatherings, with their abundance and special presentations, our wedding receptions, with their careful seating arrangements and symbolic toast sol, these echo the medieval understanding of feasting as something far more significant than everyday eating. The sensory richness of medieval feasts offered rare opportunities for pleasure in lives that were often challenging and constrained. For a few hours, participants could experience abundance, beauty, entertainment, and community. all a tanza combination that nourished body, mind, and spirit simultaneously. This holistic approach to dining represents a wisdom we might do well to reconsider in our often rushed and disconnected modern meals. Behind every successful medieval feast stood an army of skilled workers whose coordinated efforts made the event possible. The head cook directed kitchen operations with the precision of a military commander, overseeing specialized staff responsible for different aspects of preparation. There might be sauce masters, pastry experts, roasting specialists, and many others, each contributing their particular skills to the overall creation. The soft sounds of this kitchen orchestration might occasionally reach the grathalva, rhythmic chopping of ingredients, the sizzle of meat being basted, perhaps the occasional instruction called from one cook to another. These productive sounds represented the hidden labor that supported the visible splendor of the feast itself. Beyond the kitchen, the successful feast required the efforts of the cellar managing wines and beverages, the pantler responsible for bread and place settings, servers trained in the precise etiquette of formal service, and entertainers prepared to delight the gathered company. All these individuals performed their specialized roles within a complex system that had evolved over centuries to create these remarkable dining events. The medieval feast also had spiritual dimensions we might overlook from our modern perspective. Grace would be said before eating, acknowledging God as the ultimate source of all nourishment. Feast days were often aligned with religious observances, creating connections between physical and spiritual sustenance. Even the generous sharing with those of lower status, such as distributing leftovers to servants or the poor, was seen as a Christian duty implicit in the feast tradition. As our exploration of medieval feasting draws to a close, the imagined sounds around you grow softer, perhaps just the occasional clink of cups being collected, the distant murmur of servants beginning their cleaning, or the soft crackle of hearth fires burning lower as the night deepens. These gentle ambient sounds create a perfect background for the transition toward sleep. The medieval feast represents something our modern dining has largely lost, a holistic experience that nourished all the senses while simultaneously reinforcing social bonds and acknowledging the deeper meanings of shared sustenance. As you drift toward sleep, perhaps you'll carry with you some appreciation for this more integrated approach to dining. This understanding of food as something that feeds far more than just the body. May the gentle echoes of medieval feast, warm glow of candlelight, the rich mingling of aromas, the pleasant hum of conversation, and the satisfaction of sheer abundance carry you peacefully toward slumber, just as they once carried our ancestors from the vivid experience of the feast to the quiet surrender of sleep. Welcome back, dear friends, as we continue our soporific journey through medieval history. In this chapter, we'll be wandering through the tranquil realm of castle gardens, exploring spaces that were not merely decorative, but essential sources of medicine, nutrition, and solace in medieval life. As you settle deeper into comfort, imagine yourself stepping through an arched stone doorway into a walled garden where was a multifaceted space that served numerous practical purposes while also providing aesthetic and spiritual sustenance. Unlike our modern ornamental gardens, these carefully tended spaces were working landscapes, productive in multiple ways, yet designed with an eye toward beauty and symbolism as well. The garden represented a harmonious integration of the practical and the beautiful that characterized much of medieval life at its best. Imagine the gentle transition as you move from the sometimes dark, enclosed spaces of the castle interior into the open air of the garden. The quality of light changes, sunlight filtering through fruit tree branches or reflecting from the surface of a small pond. The sounds shift from echoes off stone to the softer acoustics of an outdoor space. Birdsong becomes more prominent. Perhaps the gentle splash of a fountain or the rustling of leaves in a light breeze. These sensory transitions create an immediate feeling of release and expansion. The ambient sounds of the garden surround you now, the distant buzzing of bees among flowering herbs, the soft cooing of doves nesting in nearby towers, the occasional light snap of pruning shears as a gardener tends to plants. These gentle sounds create a peaceful audio landscape. Harsh weather and unwanted animal visitors. They created microclimates that allowed for growing plants that might not thrive in the open landscape. And symbolically, they referenced the hortus conclusus, or enclosed garden, from biblical tradition. Medieval gardeners created distinct zones, 4 different types of plants. The herb garden, or herbarium, contained medicinal and culinary plants, arranged according to use and growing requirements. The kitchen garden provided vegetables and fruits for the castle tables. Ornamental areas might feature flowering plants valued for their beauty and symbolism. And for the most elaborate castle gardens, specialized spaces might include a vineyard, an orchard, or even a small wilderness area designed to evoke the Forest of Eden. As you continue to relax deeper, picture yourself following a gravel path through these various garden spaces. The soft crunch of stone beneath your feet creates a rhythmic soundtrack to your explorations. The path itself represents human intention imposed on nature, guiding movement through the garden while allowing access to its various treasures. These paths often formed geometric turnquoises, circles, or squares that reflected the medieval/understanding of cosmic order. The herb garden would likely be positioned close to the castle kitchen or infirmary for convenient access. Here, plants were organized according to both practical and symbolic considerations. Those with similar growing requirements might be grouped together, but so too might plants associated with particular saints or those used to treat specific ailments. Imagine the rich tapestry of scents as you pass through Fischerbeck. Sharp clarity of sage, the sweet perfume of lavender, the bright freshness of mint, and the earthy depth of rosemary. These aromatic plants release their fragrant oils as you brush past, creating an olfactory experience that connects directly to memory and emotion, to influence mood and mind. The plants themselves would be arranged in raised beds, edged with woven willow, stacked stones, or even decorative tiles in wealthier establishments. These elevated growing areas made tending and harvesting easier, while also creating visual definition within the garden space, and colors arranged in pleasing geometric formations. The sounds of the herbarium have there, of the castle's herbalist to an apprentice gathering plants for the day's needs. These productive sounds form a soothing backdrop to our continued exploration. Medieval gardeners possessed sophisticated knowledge about plant properties and uses. Compiled in the 1st century CE, This ancient wisdom was augmented by practical experience passed down through generations and the considerable contributions of monastic gardens, where extensive experimentation and record-keeping advanced horticultural knowledge. Throughout the medieval period, the medicinal plants growing in a castle garden would address a wide range of ailments. Feverfew and willow bark provided relief from pain and fever in a time before aspirin. Each plant represented a specific solution to human suffering, a green ally in the constant battle against illness and injury. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine the gentle care with which these medicinal plants would be harvested at specific times of day to maximize their potency, with particular tools deemed appropriate for different species, often accompanied by whispered prayers or charms that acknowledged the plant's sacrifice for human benefit. This respectful approach to plant harvesting reflected the medieval understanding of nature as both divine gift and active partner in human well-being. Moving beyond the medicinal herbs, the castle garden would contain numerous plants for culinary use. Parsley, chives, thyme, and other familiar herbs would provide flavoring for the castle kitchen. Vegetables appropriate to the region would grow in nitros, perhaps cabbages. Castle meals. These kitchen garden plants were valued not just for flavor, but also for their nutritional benefits. Understood through the medieval theory of humors that governed food choices and health management. The ambient sounds shift slightly as we move. Framed herbarium to kitchen garden, perhaps now including the soft scrape of a hoe cultivating between rows, the splashing of water being carried for irrigation, the fluttering of fabric, scarecrows moving in the breeze. These productive sounds remind us that the medieval garden was a workspace as much as a place of beauty, a source of daily sustenance requiring constant tending. Fruit trees might form another section of the castle garden, often trained against sun-warmed walls to extend the growing season. Apples, pears, plums, and cherries would provide fresh fruit in season and preserves for winter months. The careful grafting and pruning of these trees represented some of the most sophisticated horticultural knowledge of the medieval period, with techniques refined over generations to improve yield and fruit quality. Can you picture the dappled shade beneath these fruit trees on a summer afternoon? The shifting patterns of light and shadow across the ground, the occasional soft thud of ripe fruit falling onto the earth, the sweet scent of sun-warmed apples or pears. Framework of the castle garden. 4 castles with sufficient space and resources. A vineyard might occupy a south-facing slope. The cultivation of grapes for wine production was both practically important and symbolically significant, with connections to biblical traditions and Christian sacraments. Summer tending. Autumn harvest created a living calendar that marked the passage of time through visible changes in the landscape. As you continue to relax deeper, imagine the gentle sounds of the castle vineyard, perhaps the soft snip of pruning shears, the rustle of leaves being trained along supporting structures, or in harvest season. These acoustic elements create another layer in our garden soundscape, another soothing backdrop to our historical journey. Water features were important elements in many castle gardens, serving both practical and aesthetic purposes. A well or spring provided essential irrigation while also creating a focal point for garden design. Channels might direct water through different garden areas, maximizing its use before finally flowing away. Small ponds could support fish for the castle table, while also reflecting sky and surrounding plantings. Create perhaps the most soothing element of our ambient, soft splash of a simple fountain, the subtle gurgling of water moving through channels, the occasional plop of a fish rising to the surface of a pond. These water sounds have calmed human nervous systems for centuries, creating a universal lullaby that transcends specific historical periods. Beyond the strictly utilitarian aspects of the garden lay areas designed primarily for pleasure and contemplation. A turf bench set against a sunny wall provided space for reading, conversation, or simply enjoying the garden's beauty. Arbors, covered with climbing roses or grapevines, created shaded retreats for hotter days. These comfort-focused features acknowledged the garden's role, not just in feeding and healing the body, but in nourishing the soul as well. Medieval castle gardens often included symbolic elements that might seem strange to our modern sensibilities. Plants were valued not only for their practical properties, but for their associations and meanings. The lily represented purity, the rose divine love, the violet humility. Growing these plants brought their symbolic virtues into the castle sphere, a form of horticultural moral instruction. Welcome back, dear friends, as we continue our saporific journey through medieval history. In this chapter, we'll wander into the warm, bustling realm of the castle kitchen alchemical workshop, where simple ingredients transformed into hearty feasts. As you settle more deeply into comfort, imagine yourself stepping down narrow, stone stairs into a low-ceilinged chamber, lit by the flicker of hearth flames and the glow of a handful of iron lanterns. The medieval castle kitchen was an orchestrated symphony of scent, sound, and movement. Imagine stone walls darkened by centuries of wood smoke, heavy oak beams above crisscrossing like the ribs of some great beast, and in the center, a vast hearth where roaring flames licked at iron cauldrons, suspended from hooks. Here, cooks often cloaked in simple tunics worked tirelessly to sustain the entire household. Their tools were basic yet sturdy, long wooden paddles for stirring thick pottages, iron ladles for skimming fat, and woven baskets for scooping fresh produce from the gardens. As you allow yourself to relax, meat on a heavy wooden block. Listen for the faint hiss of sizzling fat as strips of bacon crisp over hot coals, and the occasional clang of metal when a pot is shifted or lid is lifted. These sounds, steady, unhurried, grounding, create a comforting tapestry that invites you to breathe more slowly. The scents of the kitchen are complex and ever-changing. At first, you might catch the deep, smoky aroma of oak wood burning, with the heavier scent of simmering meat and root vegetables. Imagine breathing in these layered aromas, each one designed to draw you deeper into a sense of warmth and contentment. Castles often had multiple cooking areas, one for everyday meals, and a secondary, more elaborately equipped kitchen reserved for feasts or special occasions. In the main kitchen, you would find large hearths fed by sturdy logs, while the secondary kitchen might boast multiple ovens built into thick stone walls, each with its own firebox and chimney. Picture the baker's corner, where flat loaves of thick, coarse bread baked against red-hot stones, eventually giving off that unmistakable yeasty. Imagine yourself moving along the wide stone floor, feeling the cool roughness beneath your feet. Your eyes adjust to low light as you drift past row upon row of wooden shelves. On these shelves rest earthenware bowls filled with dried legumes, peas, lentils, beans waiting to be boiled into protein-rich soups. Nearby, wicker baskets overflow with onions, leeks, and garlic, their papery skins rustling softly when stirred by a gentle breeze drifting from a small open window. At one corner of the kitchen lies the butchering block. Here, cuts of pork, beef, and game hang from broad iron hooks. A master butcher, seasoned by years of practice, methodically breaks down a freshly slaughtered animal, separating joints of meat while preserving bones for the marrow and fat for tallow. Can you sense the faint sweetness of cured ham hanging to dry nearby? This layering of protein, salt, jars of preserved fruits, plums, cherries, quinces, sit. The air here carries a sweet tart tang that contrasts with the smoky urgency of the hearth. Listen to the steady drip of brine as someone lifts a weight from a barrel of pickled Brussels sprouts, preparing them for the table. Within the kitchen, apprentices and journeymen moved with quiet purpose. Picture a young cook kneeling at a wooden table dusted with coarse flour. Feel the faint vibration beneath the tabletop as his palms press dough down and his fingertips trace pattern-like grooves across its surface. The scent of fresh dough, warming by the fire, offers a simple promise of comforter. Promise that even in lean times, nourishment and warmth remain possible. Of course, every grand castle feast required the kitchen to work in harmony with other service areas. Forthwith a fizz that momentarily softens the sounds of the busy kitchen. Feel yourself enveloped in this multi-sensory embrace. Coals radiating heat through wooden floors. Voices quietly calling for a fresh supply of herbs, and the intermittent clank of a chain being adjusted to raise or lower a pot. As you drift into deeper calm, consider the medieval theory of humors that governed not only medical practice, but also dietary choices. Cooks often balanced ingredients to avoid excess heat or cold in dishes, pairing meat with certain herbs to offset what was perceived as too much phlegm or bile. Pottages might be enriched with wine or vinegar to stimulate the stomach, while cooling vegetables like cucumbers or lettuce were offered to soothe the body and spirit. Imagine a cook gently mixing crushed rose petals and honey into a small dish of cooled summer fruit, believing this sweet, fragrant concoction would restore both physical and emotional balance. Feasting was not merely consumption. It was a carefully choreographed ritual. Picture an occasional grand banquet. The kitchen staff would time every dish so that stews emerged from the ovens just as roasted birds finished crisping in the fire. The air would steam as platters were lined up, pheasants stuffed with sweet dried fruits, pies encased in decorative pastry, bowls of spiced broth served in elaborately carved wooden trenchers. Waitstaff, clad in simple tunics, carried these dishes carefully through the corridors, guided by the warmth of flickering torchlight. Finally, allow yourself to drift even deeper into relaxation as the pace of the kitchen slows at day's end. The fire in the hearth dwindles to glowing coals. The last of the evening's scraps are skimmed from cauldrons, and the cook's apprentice sweeps the stone floor with a bundle of straw, the bristles whispering against the rough surface. A single lantern remains lit, its flame dancing lazily behind glass. and only the soft murmur of select voices drifts down the stone stair. In this moment of quiet closure, you can almost feel the warmth lingering in the walls, the soft echoes of laughter and conversation still etched in every brick. The alchemy of the castle kitchen has settled into a gentle hush, inviting you to sink further into comfort. As your mind floats in that soothing embrace, know that tomorrow's hearth will ignite once more, and the timeless dance of wood, flame, and flavor will resume, a reminder that even in the darkest stone walls, life and warmth flourish. Welcome back, dear friends. As our soporific voyage through medieval history carries us now into the hushed, sacred space of the castle chapel. In this chapter, we'll explore a place where stone, light, and song combined to lift souls toward the divine. As you nestle more deeply under the soft cover of calm, imagine yourself climbing a short set of worn steps and passing through an arched doorway into a vault of cool shadow and soft candlelight. The castle chapel was both simple and sublime. Its walls, often built of pale limestone or cool gray sandstone, rose upward in gentle curves toward a vaulted ceiling. Here, flickering candles in iron sconces cast dancing, warm patches of light that played across carved capitals and smooth ashlar blocks, soft emerald greens, and glowing ambers that created flickering patterns on the stone floor. Allow your eyes to adjust to this delicate interplay of light and shadow as you drift deeper into peace. Pause to listen. The chapel's acoustics were designed to carry voices, whether in whispered prayer or haunting chant, through every nook and cranny. Hear the distant echo of a monk's soft footsteps as he approaches the altar for evening vespers. Imagine the gentle rustle of a tunic brushing against cool stone, the faint tapping of wooden prayer benches as a clergy member takes a seat. Even in stillness, the chapel seemed to breathe with sacred anticipation, a low hum of reverence that invites your own mind to slow its pace. The scent of the chapel was subtle yet profound, a blend of cool stone, beeswax candles, and the faintest trace of incense, perhaps frankincense or myrtle, lingering from an earlier service. This aroma created a bridge between the earthly and the divine, coaxing breaths to come slower and deeper as you inhale. Often a simple slab of polished stone, draped with richly embroidered cloth, angels, and scenes from Scripture. Imagine the soft rustle of vellum as a priest turns a page, his fingertips careful not to smudge the gold leaf that glimmers in candlelight. Each illuminated letter and ornate border offered a moment of wonder, a reminder that human devotion and artistry were inseparable in medieval worship. Surrounding the altar, slender columns rose like silent sentinels, each crowned with intricately carved capitals reflecting both geometric patterns and stylized foliage. These capitals told stories of greater mysteries, vine leaves symbolizing the blood of Christ, interlaced knots alluding to the eternal nature of faith. Trace their shapes in your mind's eye, swirling acanthus leaves, interwoven arcs forming delicate tracery. Each curve a testament to the craftsman's devotion. As you allow yourself to sink more deeply into calm, recall the gentle strains of Gregorian chant drifting through the chamber. Though the voices are unseen, you can picture a small choir of brothers dressed in simple habits, their voices rising in harmony to create a resonant, undulating wave. Listen to the way a single lyric, softly intoned, floats upward and then settles back into the stone, lingering like a whispered promise. These sacred melodies have the power to still thought and open the heart, inviting every listener into a contemplative embrace. Perhaps you notice the soft glimmer of polished brass, candlesticks arranged in tiers along the altar rail. Each candle's flame dances with a purpose, its glow a symbol of Christ's light in earthly darkness. Imagine the careful hand of a server gently refilling a lamp with scented oil, the faint hiss as a fresh wick meets flame. The collective warmth of dozens of candles banished the chapel's chill and fostered an atmosphere of intimate reverence. Off to one side, a carved wooden lectern held a folio Bible, its heavy covers bound in leather, embossed with a cross. The scriptural readings for each day were read aloud in a clear, steady voice. Picture an acolyte gently lifting the lectern's lid, the hinges creaking in soft protest, then placing his hand upon the lectern's slanted surface. Feel the gentle tremor in the air as he begins the evening's reading, perhaps a psalm that speaks of still waters and green pastures, words that cradle the soul in reassurance and hope. Behind you, rows of narrow wooden benches offered space for nobles, retainers, and servants alike. Imagine your own weight settling into the smooth, worn surface of a bench as you sink into rest. Feel your garment brushing against the carved edgespur, perhaps the faint imprint of a family crest or a simple floral motif. The vaulted ceiling might be adorned with simple ribbing that rose like the ribs of a protective ark. In grander chapels, there might even be frescoes of saints and angels arranged in concentric circles, their soft hues faded by centuries, but still discernible if you allow your vision to soften. Imagine yourself gazing upward, your eyes tracing the gentle lines of stone that curve overhead. Let your breath slow as you contemplate these silent sentinels that have witnessed countless prayers, vows, and moments of silent communion as your mind drifts deeper. Recall the ceremony of evening compline moment when candles were extinguished one by one, leaving only the flickering taper at the altar. Picture the gradual dimming of light, each flame snuffed with reverent hush until all that remained was a single glow. Feel the deep, resonant tone of a final bell marking the completion of prayer, a signal that though the world outside remained restless, within these walls all was at peace. Even in quietude, the chapel's atmosphere remained alive. Perhaps a single mote of dust drifts in a stray beam of moonlight entering through a lancet window. Can you feel its slow, graceful descent? Draw your attention to that tiny speckin ancient remnant suspended between earth and heaven, a gentle reminder that even the smallest details carry meaning. Before you step away, picture a small niche carved into the chapel's side wall. Within it rests a simple statue of the Virgin Mary, her hands folded in prayer, her face a serene mask of maternal compassion. Light from a nearby candle bathes her features in warm amber, casting soft shadows that play across her drapery. Kneel or imagine kneeling for a moment in silent awe, feeling a connection not only to the devotion of medieval worshippers, but to a timeless blessed thread of human yearning for solace. As you turn to leave, notice the hollow echo your footsteps make against the stone floor. Each step carries you further from this sanctuary, Yet the peace of the chapel remains, with you woven into the fibers of your being like an invisible tapestry. The hush, the scent of beeswax and incense, the memory of gentle chants. These treasures accompany you as you ascend the stairs once more. Returning to the broader castle world, allow yourself to drift even deeper into relaxation now, knowing that the sanctuary you visited will welcome you again in dreams. The castle chapel, with its stone arches and radiant candles, has offered a gift of stillness that transcends time, a reminder that within every stone lies a prayer, and within every heart lies a need for quiet communion. As sleep beckons, carry this gentle hush with you into the night, breathing deeply as the world around you grows hushed, and know that all is, for this moment, well.